Hello and welcome to Glasgow Rangers Nation with me, your host, Owen James, a channel that brings you all your latest Rangers news. Guys, it is a pretty intense period for the club. We build up, obviously, to Stoke Bucharest on Thursday. We'll have some, obviously, build up to that. We've got a live podcast tonight, guys. Your chance to come and join in the conversations. Please, obviously, come and join that. Let's get a maximum view for that one. We're going to talk a little bit about Clement's future. Look, I mean, it is open for debate. It is very much the topic of this discussion at this moment in time. Personal opinion is that realistically, I don't think he is going to get sacked within the next sort of week, or so, because of the fact that literally there is no direction at the club at this moment in time. The club is rudderless. The club is kind of drifting. It's kind of on an open ocean, and it's kind of like a ghost ship. It's like the Marie Celeste of Scottish football. It just drifts casually along without any direction from the top. Now, people can argue, obviously, that John Gilligan is at the top and he is the chairman of the football club, but the problem is that John Gilligan is the interim chairman of the football club. Now, as an interim chairman, you don't have an awful lot of power. You don't have a lot of decision making. You don't have a lot of say in what really goes on at the club, because whatever decisions you make, whoever replaces you is probably going to change those decisions. The other issue around that, obviously, is that there is no CEO. There's nobody actually running the executive side. So the CEO has obviously been absent since James Bisgrove left. There is no director of football either to kind of supervise an appointment. So, this club is very much in a situation where it's got to kind of live with what it's got. Now, it's got to move, I think, fairly quickly to obviously appoint people to key positions, to appoint a new chairman, to appoint a new CEO, to get a new director of football in place. And we can't be still sat here, in my opinion, in January, sitting here going, well, we need a new CEO, we need a new chairman, we need a new director of football. I think if we're still sat here in 2 months' time, we have not got a CEO, we have not got a new chairman, and we have not got a new director of football, then realistically, we are up shit creek without the proverbial, aren't we? We are really in a bad state of affairs. Now, Clement is in a very difficult position at this moment in time. Clement is if we take just the playing side for the moment, look, we can all agree, I think, that Rangers are an absolute shambles from top to bottom. There is just, like I said, no direction in this club whatsoever. Nobody is leading this club forward. Nobody is making decisions. Nobody is really in a position to make decisions. And I've seen so many hilarious memes on Facebook and on social media and X, the next Rangers board meeting, it's one person sat around John Gilligan it's a mock-up of John Gilligan sat around an empty table. No doubt with the Parks working in. But, that's the situation. Now, Clement is in a difficult, tricky situation, because the argument very much is that he can't be sacked because he's just signed this new contract, which is just a disaster. The contract's a disaster. It really genuinely is. I don't understand where the board are coming from by giving him that year's extension. Well, I do. I kind of do, because I think it was a move by John Bennett to kind of back up what he was saying, when he made that statement in that interview that he gave at the start of the season, when he talked about, we can't go through this rinse repeat of sacking managers, which, is true. We can't. You can't become Chelsea, which are a basket case of a club. You can't become Watford, who are also a basket case of a club. You can't be one of these clubs that constantly changes its manager. But the argument is that you do sometimes have to, because if that person is not up to the job, if that person is not doing their job to a high enough standard, then you can have, with the best will in the world, all this desire to not change your manager constantly. But you kind of have to, because you're kind of landing yourself in a position where the standards you expect and the expectation you have as a club, as a fan base, as a team, as an organization, as a historical team, is not clearly being met by the present manager. Now, I think to argue that Clement shouldn't be sacked because it just basically means we'll bring somebody else in who'll then need his own players, and then we'll have a rebuild again, and it's all going to be a vicious cycle, I think is a very spurious argument. I think it's a very false narrative as well, because I honestly believe with the bringing of Niels Koppen as director of football, Rangers have tried to move away from this manager brings in the players, manager dominates the discussion. Manager is the man who selects the players, who brings in the players, who, does all this. For me, we're working on a European model, and the European model is where the director of recruitment or director of football, whoever that may be, is the person who brings in the footballers. And they bring in footballers to play to a particular style or a particular way of playing. And the manager, yes, the manager does have a say. And of course, Phillipe Clement has had a say in, the likes of Mo Diamande, Oscar Cortez, Hamza Igman, for example, Robin Proper. But he doesn't have the total say. He hasn't got the final say. The idea is that you bring in a set of players that can play to a system or to a way of playing that you want them to, and you then bring in coaches to match those players. It's very much the kind of way that clubs work. You look at, clubs down south that have done this. You look at, you look at, for example, Brighton, who obviously replaced De Zerbi, the new manager, and are doing just as well as they were the previous, without making a massive splash in the transfer market this season. That's just one example. So look, you do have a situation where I don't think the sacking of Clement means, again, another rebuild, another mass changeover of players. I think there is going to be a changeover of players anyway, because I think there is still a need within the club to clear out a lot of the dead wood. There is still, I think, an awful lot of passengers, an awful lot of players who are not up to the standard we need at this club. Cyril Dessers, James Tavernier, Kieran Dowell, Robbie Matondo, to name but four. So there is obviously that need to bring in new players. I think so. Whoever the manager is, that will happen now. Whether that's Clement, whether that's Ian Other, whether that's Muscat, whether that's Will Still, whether that's, I don't know, Francesco Farioli. Not that he'd come now, but excuse me, sorry, tired. Someone like that. I don't know. They come in because they work to a shape, they work to a formation. And you look at a lot of the continental clubs, that's the way they work. So I think it's an utterly false narrative to say that a new manager means more new players, because there's going to be more new players anyway, not because the manager changes, because the club is going through a period of change anyway. We've got a poll running on the channel at the moment. Should Clement be sacked? Does he need more time? I don't get why we'd give him more time. I mean, the guy's had a year. He's had a year. Now, for me, within that year, you'd want to see, no matter who your players are, a formation that works, a style that works, a shape that works, an identity that works. Now, for me, in that year that he has been in charge of the club, we have not seen an evolution of a style. We've not seen the evolution of a shape. We've not seen the evolution of a set of tactics. We've not seen a plan B. We've seen some very bad in-game management. We've seen substitutions that don't work. We've seen some bizarrely timed substitutions. We've seen some really bad decisions from the manager. We've seen him with his favourites and players who can play as badly as they want and never get dropped. And yes, to some extent, he has been hampered by injuries. Of course he has. But how is that not true of every manager? Every manager has a period of time when they lose players. You look at Pep Guardiola, who manages the best team in world football at the moment, Manchester City. He's had periods when he's not had Erling Haaland and Kevin De Bruyne, two of the best footballers in the world, and he's replaced them. I think he replaced them last year with Julian Alvarez and Phil Foden, for example, who are still world-class footballers. But, he came up with an alternative. He came up with a plan to replace them, and he played a different way. Clement, to me, has so many weaknesses in what he does, what he says. And he's in a way making a rod for his own back. Now, look, part of the video is 4 games to save his job. Now, it realistically could be a situation where he could have just 4 games to save his job. And for me, within that 4-game period, he's going to need to change. He's going to need to show some flexibility. And I'm not entirely convinced that Phillipe Clement has it within him to show that flexibility, to show that ability to change. He really doesn't. I mean, we look at the league table as it stands today, on the 22nd of October, when we're supposed to see a better Rangers or a best Rangers or whatever it was. He said, I think it's semantics to argue over the words. I think the words mean the same no matter which way you put them. Celtic 22 points, Aberdeen 22 points, joint top. Rangers on 16. 6 points behind them. Dundee on 15 are only a point behind us. Motherwell only 3 points behind us. and then Dundee in 6, 9 points. I mean, you take the top four, for example, top four alone, you'd say that Dundee United are actually close to Rangers, and Rangers in more direct battle with Dundee to hang on to third than we are to try and chase Aberdeen and Celtic down at the moment, which for a club like us is absolutely unforgivable. Now, in terms of this 4 games to save his job, you know, Alan Hutton recently was speaking, and he was asked how many more bad results can Phillipe Clement survive, and his answer was not many more. You know, we're going into a period of 4 games from the 24th of October to the 3rd of November. And within that period, you know, within that sort of, you know, within that period, there isn't a lot of room for manoeuvre. There really isn't. Within those 4 games upcoming, I mean, I think we can kind of write off the Steaua Bucharest game. I think we forget about the European football at this stage. Yes, you know, a bad result in Europe again will not go down well at all, but it is Europe. And I think there is kind of a difference there because of the fact that it's European football and you're playing kind of an unknown there. I mean, we don't know what team Steaua Bucharest are going to play, how they're going to play, etc., etc. Now, the Rangers could well win that game, but what does it realistically mean? It means nothing in a domestic sense. I mean, so you could kind of argue that first game is kind of not that important, but every game is important. So it's a difficult one, that one. But the next 3 domestic games could really go a long way to deciding Phillipe Clement's future. St Mirren on Saturday at Ibrox. I mean, St Mirren, realistically, you know, Rangers have got to be putting that team away. But it's, for me, it's not just about beating St Mirren. It's about putting on a performance. It's about starting to show that whatever the manager is trying to do or trying to accomplish, there's elements there which I'm not seeing. He talks an awful lot of rubbish at times. I mean, he sat there on Sunday and he said that, you know, you look back over the results of the last couple of weeks or the performances of the last couple of weeks, and, you know, and he kind of used that as a reason to justify why the team are actually getting better, but they're not. I mean, with all the best will in the world, the performance against St Johnstone was poor. The game against Hibs, we were lucky to win. You know, yeah, the Malmo game was very good, but the Lyon game was poor. We've only won, I think, something like 4 of our last 16 games. We've scored 1 goal away from home this season. We're the lowest scorers in the league away from home this season. So that's poor. I mean, I think Wednesday, the 30th of October, that game looms absolutely massive at Pittodrie. You know, Aberdeen are in a sterling run of form. They got that draw with Celtic, obviously, at Parkhead. Jimmy Thielen has got them well organised. He's got them playing with a good style, which he's managed to introduce after only a few games, not a whole year. I think if Rangers were to lose that, then the pressure would go through the roof. His position genuinely could become thoroughly untenable if Rangers were to lose that game to Aberdeen. I'll be honest with you. You know, you look at the 2 teams at the moment, and I genuinely can't see this team beating them. I genuinely can't. And I think that is largely down to the manager's tactics, the manager's coaching, the manager's abilities. And I think there is some players within the team that shouldn't be in that team. I think James Tavernier is a fundamental problem within this. Squad. I think he is a massive issue within the squad. Yes, he's not the only issue, but he is a huge part of the problem. You know, he's the captain, he's the leader. He doesn't do that. So I do think that game on the 30th is absolutely massive. And then you've got the Sunday game against Motherwell on the 3rd. That's a semi-final. I mean, we lose that, and that's disaster. We win that, we go to a final. I think that probably buys him more time. But, you know, if, for example, we win that game on the 3rd of November, then the likelihood is that we will have 2 Old Firm games upcoming after that, the cup final, because I do think that Celtic will beat Aberdeen in the semi-final, and then obviously the game at Ibrox. Now, if Clement was to lose the next 2 Old Firm games, that would be a completely different story. I mean, I think, you know, you sit there with your, if you sit there and really think about this, can Phillipe Clement survive 2 Old Firm games where he doesn't win? If Rangers were to lose a cup final to Celtic, that would be massive, and that again the pressure turns up on him. And then if they were to not win, I think that's the key thing, not win. I don't think a draw is good. And then, I mean, I certainly don't want to hear, the ridiculous statement of moral victories. I mean, I think that comment after the Celtic game last year was just absolutely stupid from him. And it comes on the back of a number of absolutely ridiculous comments that Phillipe Clement's made about moral victories, about the fact that we were just as good against Celtic. We were just as good as Celtic were in that game that we lost at Parkhead. Absolute spurious shit from the manager. It really genuinely was. So look, it's difficult. I do genuinely believe that if he goes into that cup final on the back of, say, losing at Aberdeen or not winning at Aberdeen, and then loses a cup final and then goes on to not win the next Old Firm game, then I genuinely can see him getting the sack, because his position will be the pressure will be too much on whoever is in charge of the club. Now, there is another possibility which could happen. That is if Rangers were to get new investors, and this is all pie in the sky thoughts, but if Rangers were to come out and actually get new investment into the squad, then maybe, just maybe, that they would want their own man in charge. They'd look at Phillipe Clement, they'd look at the situation, and they kind of say, well, we're not playing well, we haven't got a style, we haven't improved any of the players, we're not really moving forward with this. And he comes out with an awful lot of rubbish a lot of the time. So time for a new manager, time for our own guy. So look, there's a lot out there. Now, Clement, at the moment, his record as Rangers manager is genuinely not brilliant. I mean, his win percentage is still better than Paul Le Guen's and Pedro Caíña's. 57 games in charge of Rangers, 38 victories, 9 draws, 10 defeats. I mean, that's pretty poor. 66.67% win ratio. It's worse than Michael Beale's. It's not great, is it? It really genuinely isn't great. It is poor. And I think Alan Hutton's right with what he says. I don't think he can survive a lot more. I genuinely don't believe that there is a lot more that he can survive in terms of defeats. I think he's pretty much on his last chance in terms of that. Now, look, I mean, the issue, obviously, like I said, is at the top of the club. There is no direction at this moment in time. There really isn't. I mean, his win percentage is still technically better than Gio's. Gio had a 61.76% percentage. He 68 games in charge, 42 victories, 12 draws, 14 defeats. But I'll be honest with you. For me, I look at Clement and I look at how we play. I look at the style we play with, or lack of it. And like I said in the video yesterday, I don't see anything that inspires. I don't see any signs of progress. I don't see how what we were seeing towards the end of last season is any better or worse, or arguably the same. Well, it is arguably the same as what we were seeing. It hasn't developed. It hasn't got better. You can't name a single player that is improved. You can't, name a game perhaps other than the Hearts 5-0 where we played absolutely fantastic football. And I think the thing is, I mean, possibly the only game that you can kind of pick out maybe is the Betis game against a good team. No insult to Hearts, but they're not exactly a great side, are they? I mean, I'm talking about a team that are one of the more difficult teams to play against than to beat. And that's Celtic, that's a European opponents, that's those top teams. I mean, as much as we hate them, we have to admit they are a top team within our country. So that's where we're at with that one. I genuinely believe that he's in a very difficult position. Now, do I think he's got 4 games to save his job? Probably not. I genuinely believe that we could win 3 out of the 4 and he keeps his job. I genuinely believe we could go to Pittodrie, lose, and he keeps his job. Why do I believe that? Because I don't believe there's any direction at the top or any appetite at the top to take the action and actually sack him. Mainly because I don't think there is anybody there who can sack him, because there's no direction within the club. It is a sorry state of affairs, guys. It really is. And it's difficult. You kind of sit here and you try and kind of come up with a solution. You try and come up with, some positivity, some rays of hope, some to give you that things can only get better, that things will get better in time. But I'll be honest with you, at the moment, I can't see how it does, because Clement is not going to change. I mean, he's not going to change. He'll play 4-2-3-1. He'll use the same style that he wants to use. He'll keep James Tavernier will start every single game at right back. Cyril Dessers will start the vast majority of games up front, and he's been dog shy the last few games. It's just a very difficult situation that we're in as a club, and we need to, as much as we might say it's a rebuild and it's a season to put right what's gone wrong in the past, it isn't looking that way. We're not seeing progress towards that, and that's what you want to see. That's what you need to see. It's over. It's been a bit of a ramble and a bit of a rant, but I just want to kind of talk a little bit about where we're up to at the moment, and where I am up to at the moment with the whole situation. If you are one of the Rangers fans that believe that Clement should get more time, I'd love you to explain to me why he should get more time and what gives you encouragement that what he's doing is going to work long term. Because as someone who coached, as someone who is a coach, I don't see anything in what he does. I think he's an absolutely shit coach, to be honest with you. I think, when you've got a manager who's a poor coach, you need a good set of coaches around him. Van der Hayden certainly doesn't seem that. Underlink doesn't seem to be that. And Alex Ray, I don't know what he does at the club. There we go, guys. Let me know what you think anyway. Let me know your thoughts. Obviously, on the way out, please smash the sub, please smash the like, drop a comment, do a share, all that good stuff. Thank you for watching Glasgow Rangers Nation, guys. We're about to speak to you on the channel very soon. And always remember, please never forget, we are the people.